I screwed up. Is this all clear as mud? Welcome to Life on the Moose, and welcome back if you've ever been here before. Today we're going to keep working on this shed studio. Before I jump right into it, I have several questions that people left in the comments. One of the most popular questions so far is, what are we actually going to do with this shed studio? What are we going to store in it? What are we going to keep in it? What's it going to look like? As I've mentioned to a couple people, visualize a corner of a quaint coffee shop or maybe a cozy little wine bar, something like that. So we're going to store stuff in here. We're going to store a couple chairs in here. We're going to store maybe a throw rug or an area rug in here. We're going to store a couple wine glasses, maybe a coffee mug or two. I think you get the point. This is going to act more like an additional room to the house than it will a tool shed. So hopefully that paints a good picture of what it's going to be like. This exterior and what I'm doing so far, really no different than a tool shed, at least until we get it all closed in. And then on the inside, that's when the magic really is going to happen. So if you've subscribed just to watch this series, make sure you watch it to the end because I think you're going to like how it turns out. Another couple comments I received is, these gates won't open. Well, one gate won't open. The other one isn't designed to open anymore. The one over there does not open. That one is actually screwed shut. Don't see a need for it. These are 4 feet wide each panel. When I first moved into this house, and we did a lot of work back here, I had to back my truck in a couple of times. Well, I didn't have to. I just did out of convenience because we had the space. So we screwed that side shut, and this one does open. And it does clear, by the way. Maybe you can see where I dug out the bottom right there. So I allowed for plenty of clearance with the swing of the gate, even once there's an eave on here. So a couple things I'd like to get done in today's episode. One is get this plywood on the floor. As I mentioned to you last episode, there's a couple differences between how I build here and how I build in the eastern part of the state, up in the mountains at 3,000 feet where it's very dry. Here, I'm always concerned about moisture. Ground moisture, air moisture, rain, all of the above. So because of that, I'm using treated plywood for the subfloor. For a couple of reasons, I'm not gonna have any insulation in the floor, period. It doesn't get that cold here. Rarely does it hard freeze. So I'm not so concerned about that. This 1/2-inch plywood is going to have another 3/4 inches of wood or something on top of that for the finished floor. So it'll have a little bit of thermal mass, if you will. But I'm not worried about insulation. So any moisture that does wick up, as it were, from the ground, it's going to be fine. And another reason I'm using this for my subfloor is I'm not sure when I'm going to get walls and a roof on. Well, I'll frame the walls today, I hope. But as far as the roof, I don't know. Even though according to the forecast that I have, it says no rain for the next week. Usually when it says no rain for a week, it rains. That's just the way it is here. I've found from living here, if there's a 50% chance of rain, it's really more like 95. But if I'm in the mountains and they call for a 50% chance of rain, it's usually about 10%. So that's the difference. That's why I'm taking every precaution I can. And if this floor gets wet, it isn't really going to hurt anything. It'll just dry out. So that all being said, this is going to be super easy. 3 sheets of plywood, 4 by 8. 4 times 3 is 12. 12 by 8, that's exactly the dimensions of this building. So all I got to do is set them down and nail them on. Well, we got our 2 yards of gravel delivered. That's the pile right there. Well, that's only about 1.5 yards because I used about a 1/2 yard already. I went ahead and spread a nice 1 to 2 inch thick layer of gravel under the whole building. So it's ready to go. Got the corners all graveled nicely back in there. Of course, we still have some more landscaping to do in this area, but we'll get to that. Let's put down some subfloor. Okay, 3 things I want to point out before I get much further and forget to tell you. The first thing is nails. I'm using 2 3/8 inch galvanized ring shank nails. I like to use ring shank for this type of product if you're walking on things and things have a chance to loosen up over the years. Those ring shanks really help hold a nail in the wood. 2 3/8 is probably a little bit overkill, but this way I can use it for a little thicker stuff as well. The other thing I wanted to point out is blocking. Remember the last episode I mentioned I only had, I think it was this one, because these 2 joists were just a little bit wonky, so put the blocking in just one. And I told you at the time, nothing else really needed it. Well, nothing else really does need it. But that night, I happened to be walking on these joists. It was amazing the difference in the rigidity of these joists between the blocked ones and the not blocked ones. I think that's because if a joist fails, it won't just bend and break on its axis. Generally, it will twist and break. So that's probably why. But I tell you, it makes a big difference blocking this. Again, wasn't really necessary, but I had these pieces left over from the horizontal on the fences, so I figured, why not? Oh, and lastly, I wanted to point out, I screwed up. Yes, can you believe it? Okay, can anyone tell me where I screwed up? Okay, I'll tell you. This says it all right here. See that 3/4 of an inch overhang? It doesn't have to be there. I messed up when I laid out my joist to begin with. I should have started my measurement 3/4 of an inch off of this joist. That way, the joist at the 4-foot mark would line up exactly between 2 sheets of plywood. As it is now, if I were to have this end flush, this joist would be 100% covered up, and then I wouldn't have a nailer for the next one. So, is it a huge deal? No, not really. It's gonna probably take 4 extra minutes of my life. What I'm gonna do is actually rip off that extra overhang, and I'm just gonna put it right here on this end. It'll all be covered up. It's not structural. Is it a mistake? Yeah, it is, I admit it. But you know what? I hate to use this phrase. It'll be fine. It really will be fine. going to build this wall first, the one that has a big window in it. I'm only going to have 2 windows in this whole building total. One is alongside the door, in front on that end, and a bigger window on this side of the building, facing this area right here. So I'm going to run my top and bottom plates all the way end to end, 12 feet exactly. These boards came about 3/16 of an inch long, as they often do, so don't trust that a 12-footer will be a 12-footer. So these studs are going to be 16 inches on center. Because my window is 4 feet, it's actually nets out to be 3 feet, 11 inches and a half, but my rough opening has to be exactly 4 feet. I'm actually going to lay this out just a little bit differently, just so I can hit those studs on either side of the window with a whole sheet of plywood, or probably OSB, or whatever I decide to use for the actual sheathing on the exterior. So this window is 3 feet high on this side, actually on both sides. And I'm going to use this 2x8. I'm going to double it up and use this for a header above the window on this side. I'm not so worried about the door or the window on the end, because that is a non-bearing wall in essence. Okay, I'm going to lay out my top and bottom plates right here. So as you can see, a little bit of bow in both of these boards. There's no crown really, so I'm okay with whatever's there. So I lined these up so that they would oppose and hopefully kind of correct themselves. Once this is all nailed down, it won't be an issue. The edge of the opening of the window is the jack stud. The jack stud holds up the header. The king stud goes outside the jack stud. That holds up the top plate. And underneath the window, you'll have cripples. I think jack studs are also called trimmers. Correct me if I'm wrong. I've always referred to them as jack studs, but I think some people call them trimmers depending on where you are. So then I have a full 4-foot opening before my next jack stud. Then of course king stud on the outside of that. And then from that point is a full sheet of sheathing that goes that direction. So now what I'm going to do is just take my tick marks and slide them across and put a mark across both boards. So now I have to cut these to length. My sides are going to be about 6.5 feet tall. It's kind of a weird number, I know, but I don't want it any taller than it has to be. Basically, I can stand up and look out the window without bending over too far. That's really all we want. 6 feet 6 inches right here. But my top plate is going to be 1.5 inches. Actually, I'm going to have 2 top plates. I just like to build with 2 top plates. It just ties the corners in really well. I know it's probably not necessary, but I'll do it anyway. Minus 1.5 inches for both top plates right here, and then minus 1.5 inches for the bottom plate. Stud length, 73.5 inches. So since the jack studs hold up the header, that header has to be 3 inches longer. So 48 plus 3, 51 inches. be mindful of these things. These little pieces of plastic. They break off of the nails on an air nailer. So it's best to get them out of there because in the wrong spot they can really be annoying. Okay, we have one wall in the books. Check it out. Any questions? One question I'm sure I'll get. Well, I'll probably get it no matter what. If I address it or not, there's always someone. Why didn't I glue this subfloor down? Because it's just a shed. I'll do it with my house. More important things like that. But remember, it's just a shed. It's going to be a nice one, but it's just a shed. Okay, I'm going to do this short wall over here. And I'm just going to go from that wall all the way to the corner. Those two walls will have nothing in them, so they'll go pretty quickly. So let's frame some more walls. 3 walls are in the books. Check it out. Does that look level to you? That's what I thought. You okay? Okay, good. You gotta be careful. I put a nailer on there for the sheetrock. This kind of corner is called a California corner. I could have framed it like that on the ground and then lifted it up. I just think it's easier this way. I'm gonna go ahead and put another stud in that corner. That way these two will be ready to go and have nailers for my inside material. I think I'm gonna use sheetrock, I'm not 100% sure. So that's a California corner. Speaking of California, I just wanted to make a quick comment. Prayers, thoughts are going out to everybody in California. I know I have a few subscribers in that area. Hopefully everybody's okay. Just wanted to let you know I'm thinking of you. Before I put this last stud in to make it a California corner, what I did is I took a level and I made sure this corner was roughly plumb. Now this isn't the final plumb I'll do. Before I put the sheathing on the outside, I'll make sure it's plumb, because once that sheathing is on, then it isn't gonna go anywhere. Okay, well that's a wrap for me for today. You stay put, I'll be back before you can say good morning. We have one more wall to go on this shed studio, and then all the walls will be framed. This last wall will be about as atypical as you can get. Check this out. What do we have going on here? Well, those 2x4s are just temporary. That is roughly the pitch of the roof. I set them in place because I'm actually going to build this wall around the door. Why am I doing that, you might ask? Well, the door rough opening is about 82 and a half inches high. These plates are about 78 and a half. Well, they will be about 78 and a half once I get another top plate on. My rafters will be 2x6. This is just a 2x4. It is not notched, so the fact that that is not notched will make up for the fact that the second top plate is not on. So what I'm going to do is actually stand the door up. I want to make sure I have enough swing, but make sure it opens up at least perpendicular to the door. That's the main thing. I want to be able to get stuff through the door, which is always nice. So just to keep everything relatively square, I put this 8-footer across, outside to outside, to make sure that our ends are roughly plumb. And then this right here, I'm gonna swing this, screw it to the top of the door. That way I don't have to hold it. Then I'll start framing around it and go from there. Is this all clear as mud? Okay, right there's 4 feet from this inside of the jack stud to this corner. Now, will that work? That actually might work. Well, that didn't work. Whatever you do, don't drop your level. I think that looks okay. Okay, I can't swing the door open because of this 2x4 here is too low. But as you can see, eyeballing it, and my phone is about the height of the rafter, that door will clear at least perpendicular to its opening. With my jack stud, I'm gonna run it all the way about a ½ inch taller than the top of the door. And then my king stud, as tall as these studs, and bring a top plate over to that king stud. And then we'll step up, frame around the door, step down, do something similar over there. So the finished product will look something like that, where the door is higher than the plates. Okay, this wall's finished up. Okay, 2 more tasks to do. One, I'm gonna put studs in each corner to finish my California corners on this end. And the other thing I'm gonna do is put my top plate on. I'm gonna overlap the corners, so whenever there's a seam, I'm gonna make sure I don't put the seam in exactly the same spot. Really ties it all in together. Well, let's finish up those 2 things real quickly, and then this episode should be wrapped up. And then you can get on with your joyful everyday life. Let's get back to work. Well, the walls are all framed up. Is it perfect? Of course it is. No, it's not. Thank you for watching Life in the Moose. I appreciate it. We have an unusually warm and dry spell ahead of us. In fact, for the next week, they call for no rain whatsoever and mostly sunny. So that is really weird for the Pacific Northwest, but I'll take it. And it probably means I'll spend another, maybe 2 episodes working on this shed. Well, thanks again. Be careful out there. Take care of yourself. Take care of those you care about. And I'll see you soon.